The Middle East Center at Georgia State University presents Arabic Grammar Unpacked. In this lesson, we will be discussing nouns and their attributes. Nouns in Arabic are significantly more complicated than they are in English, but the attributes aren't that difficult to learn, and if you can master them, you will have gone a long way towards mastering the basics of Standard Arabic. This lesson has several goals, among them to understand how Arabic conceives of the category of ism or noun, to learn about the jins or gender of a noun. Arabic has only masculine and feminine nouns, no neuter nouns. To learn about the adad or number of a noun. Arabic has singular, dual, and plural, where English just has singular and plural. To understand the concept of ta'rif or definiteness, and to differentiate definite from indefinite. To understand the concept of aql or intellect, to learn the rule that non-human plural is feminine singular, the most difficult rule of basic Arabic, and to be able to identify the i'rab or case markings, and to know the names of the cases they represent. Let's begin with nouns themselves. The word for noun in Arabic is ism, which you'll recognize as the word for name. A noun is a name, literally. Its plural is asma. Like all words, nouns have roots and patterns. In fact, the word noun in English is distantly related to the word name as well. Nouns in Arabic are rather more complicated than nouns in English. In your initial phases of learning Arabic, you'll have a lot of trouble with this, but if you can learn these attributes and really get used to looking at a noun and understanding what its attributes are, you will have a lot less problem learning basic Arabic. A noun represents a person, place, or thing. You're probably familiar with that from childhood. Or an idea as well. So here's some examples. Al-Walida, mother, that's a person. Al-Medina, city, that's a place. Al-Kitaab, book, that's a thing. And al-Thaqafa, culture, that's an idea. All of these are nouns, and all of them have attributes. And as we go through this lesson, you'll learn to recognize them. Let's begin with the most important one, gender or jins. The plural is al-ajnas, although it's not very often used. The word jins can mean sex or gender or even type or kind of something, or also grammatical gender. Arabic makes no distinction between sex and gender, which leads to a lot of confusion when we talk about gender roles in English. But as far as grammar is concerned, Arabic has two genders, al-dhakar, or masculine, and al-untha, or feminine. Notice that the word untha ends with the alif maksura character, which alif ba doesn't always go into great detail about. All nouns in Arabic have gender. There are no neuter nouns, only masculine and feminine. Usually, when we talk about a noun, we indicate its gender with the adjective rather than the noun. We say mudhakkar and mu'annath, and these are the adjectives that go with al-dhakar and al-untha. Other than for people, the relationship between a noun and its grammatical gender is arbitrary. Why a qalam or pen is masculine and a mektaba or library is feminine is just a matter of how the word is pronounced and how it's put together. It has nothing to do with giving the noun some kind of apparent masculinity or femininity. Let's begin with masculine, which is the default gender in Arabic. Al-dhakar is the word for the masculine gender. The adjective we use to describe the noun is mudhakkar. The word al-dhakar can denote both ordinary and grammatical masculinity. The word dhakar is a noun, but mudhakkar is an adjective, and that's how we'll refer to the nouns. The masculine is the default gender in Arabic. If we don't know what the gender of a word is, we assume it to be masculine. Nouns that denote male people are mudhakkar with almost no exceptions. Nouns that do not end with ta marbuta are nearly always mudhakkar. There are a couple of dozen common exceptions to this. One example would be ash-shams, the sun, which does not end with ta marbuta, but is nevertheless feminine in gender. And you'll get used to these couple of dozen nouns as you go through basic Arabic and why they're feminine. For the feminine gender, the word is al-untha, but we usually use the adjective mu'annath. So the word al-untha can denote both ordinary and grammatical femininity. Untha is a noun, mu'annath is an adjective. Nouns that denote female people are mu'annath, with almost no exceptions. Nouns that end with ta marbuta are nearly always mu'annath. There's only a couple of counterexamples to this, and we needn't worry about them. However, The most important rule you're going to learn here is that plural nouns denoting non-humans, animals, plants, objects, ideas, are always mu'annath, regardless of the gender of the singular noun. And I'll reinforce this as we go through this lesson. If you can learn this rule, you've learned the hardest. Let's take a look at some examples of masculine and feminine nouns. For each word, find its jither or root and indicate whether it's masculine or feminine. So our first word, walid, represents father. So its jither is going to be waw lam del, which should be fairly obvious. Its wazn is fa'il, for those of you playing at home. And it represents a masculine person, so it's a masculine noun. It's mudhakkar. By the same token, walida, or mother, has the same jither, waw lam dal, which means to be born. And it is representing a feminine person, so it is feminine in gender, mu'annath. Walad, boy, has the same jither, but it's mudhakkar because a boy is a masculine person, so it has masculine gender. By the same token, bint, with its root ba, nun, ta, is mu'annath, or feminine, because it represents a female person. So for people, this is relatively easy. For objects, it's a tiny bit trickier. Kitab, or book, its root is kaf, ta, ba, or to write, is mudhakkar, or masculine. The reason we know this is because it does not end in ta marbuta, and as we'll learn over the course of the next few lessons, it's not one of the 24 or so commonly used words that does not end in ta marbuta but is still feminine. So kitab, a book, is mudhakkar, or masculine. Mektaba, or library or bookstore, on the other hand, has the same jither, kaf, ta, ba, but it's mu'annath, and the reason we know it's mu'annath is simply because it ends in ta marbuta, so it is therefore a feminine noun. Let's take a look at some other examples. Farash, or mattress, its root is fa, ra, shin, and it does not end in ta marbuta, and it does not represent a female person, and it is not one of these 24 commonly used nouns, so we know that it's mudhakkar, or masculine. Wisada, pillow or cushion, its root is waw, sin, dal, and it's mu'annath, or feminine, because it ends in ta marbuta. By the same token, khazana, which means cabinet, is kha, ze, nun, and it's mu'annath because it ends in ta marbuta, and it represents an object. Here's the tricky one. Shems, the sun in the sky, that is shin, mim, shin, and it's mu'annath, not mudhakkar. It doesn't end in ta marbuta, so you would think it's mudhakkar, but it happens to be one of these 24 or so commonly used nouns. So shems, the sun, is feminine in Arabic. Bab, door, is an object, and it doesn't end in ta marbuta, so you're probably right if you guess that it's masculine. Its root is ba, waw, ba, which is a little bit confusing. It's one of the unsound roots because one of its letters is waw or ya. And alif is not allowed to be a root letter. So there's nothing about bab that tells you it's ba, waw, ba. You just kind of have to learn this. Tolab, students, their root is ta, lam, ba, which means to request. Students are requesters. And it's mudhakkar. Any group of people that has even one man in it is masculine. It has to be a group made up entirely of women and girls for it to be feminine in Arabic. Now let's take a look at the next attribute, number, al-adad, which means number in the regular sense. Its plural is al-adad, numbers. The word adad can mean a number you count, or the grammatical number, which is what we're concerned with here. There are 3 numbers in Arabic, 3 grammatical numbers, that is, mufrad, or singular, muthanna, or dual, and jama', or plural. We never use the number 2 to count objects. We can't say ithnain, kitab, or something like that. Instead, we call it muthanna, or dual, and we use a pair of special endings to mark it instead of counting it by number. This is a little confusing for introductory Arabic students, but you'll get used to it as well. Only nouns denoting humans can truly be plural, but for the purposes of terminology, we'll call all plural nouns jama'. This is a little confusing, and we're just going to have to get used to it. So there are 3 numbers in Arabic, mufrad, or singular, muthanna, or dual, and jama', or plural. Let's start with singular, or mufrad. The plural is mufradat. Words from the fa, ra, dal root mean individual or unique, And if there is one of any object or person, we call it mufrad or singular. Those of you who are English speakers shouldn't have any real problem with this. The plural of mufrad is mufradat, which happens to be the word for vocabulary, so you can learn that as you go as well. Let's move on to dual. Dual is muthanna. Again, it ends in alif maksura. The word for grammatically dual comes from the same root as ithnain. It's a little hard to see, but it's true. The number 2. The root is really tha, nun, waw, so it's also an unsound root because one of its letters is waw. If there's 2 of any object or person, we call it muthanna or dual. We mark nouns that are muthanna by adding the ending ani. More often than not, for grammatical reasons, the ani becomes aini, and this is not something we'll discuss today. Just learn to recognize them as the dual endings. Then we get to plural, or jam'. All words from the jim, mim, ayn root have something to do with gathering. So a jami'a, or a university, is a place where people gather together to study, for example. If there are more than 2 of any person or object, we call them jam', or plural. But only nouns denoting humans can truly be plural. This is our rule. Non-human plural is feminine singular. But for the purposes of terminology, we call all plural nouns jam'. Again, this is a little bit confusing, but it's just the way Arabic grammar works. So, let's take a few examples. Identify the jidr of each word and indicate whether that word is singular, dual, or plural. First we have talib. Talib is a student. It's from the ta, lam, ba, to request root, and it's singular. It's mufrad. There's only one student here. Remember, a student is a requester. But if we move over to the next one, we see Taliban, which we may think about those people in Afghanistan, but that's really from another language that isn't quite Arabic. Taliban is muthanna. It just means 2 students, and it has the same root. Tulab, the human plural for talib, has the same root, tal, lam, ba, to request, and it's jam', or plural. If we look at jami'a, university, it's got the jim, mim, ayn, the gathering root, but it is singular, mufrad. You may also be aware that it's feminine in gender. Why? Because it ends in ta marbuta. If we have jami'atan, notice that the ta marbuta means tied up ta, becomes untied and becomes a regular ta when it's no longer the last letter in its word. So jami'atan has the same root, jim, mim, ayn, but it's muthanna, it's dual, and it's easy to recognize because it has the an ending. So jami'atan by itself means 2 universities. We don't need the number 2, and in fact can't use the number 2 to count it. But jami'at, however, taking the ta marbuta and turning it into the typical alif ta plural, has the same root again, but this time it's jam', it's plural. But it's non-human plural, so as we'll find out, we're going to regard it as feminine singular when it comes to adjectives and verbs and so forth. This is confusing, but bear with us. As we learn more about it, it will become much clearer as we go on. Let's move on to the next attribute, definiteness. Ta'rif is the word for definiteness, and all words that come from the ayn, ra, fa root mean to know something. So ta'rif really means something like making it known. Definiteness is a concept that we don't really quite have in English, but it's fairly easy to understand and you shouldn't have too many problems with it. Definite, or mu'arraf, refers to a noun that's a particular or specific example of its kind. So the car or my car are definite, but a car is indefinite because it's not a particular specific example. Definite, or mu'arraf, is always the default. When in doubt, always use mu'arraf or definite instead of using ghair mu'arraf or indefinite. So definite or mu'arraf, it means something that has been made known is the literal translation of that word. And definite refers to a noun, again, that's a particular or specific example of its kind. Think the car or my car rather than a car. There are 4 ways to make a noun mu'arraf, and in a separate lesson we'll deal with all of these. We can add alif lam or the, we can add a possessive suffix, we can make it owned by another noun, which will be a subject of a whole lesson on its own, or we can make it a proper noun like Cairo or Muhammad. Those are automatically definite because they're proper nouns. We get to indefinite, which is ghair mu'arraf. Ghair translates into the English prefixes non or un or in or what have you. It's a way of negating something. An indefinite noun is a non-specific example of its category, just a general example like a car. Arabic has no words for a or an, so when we see a noun that's غير مؤرف, we usually translate it into English with the a or the an added. So we can read wisada as a pillow or a cushion, rather than just pillow or cushion. Let's take a look at some specific examples here. Again, identify the jidr of each word and indicate whether it's definite or indefinite. So al-khazana, its root is kha, ze, nun, and because it has alif lam, that makes it definite. It's mu'arraf. It's also feminine in gender because it ends with ta marbuta. Sijada, or carpet, comes from the root sin, jim, dal, which really means to kneel, because a carpet is something that you kneel on. And it's غير mu'arraf. It doesn't have alif lam, it doesn't have a possessive suffix, it's not owned by another noun, and it's not a proper noun. So it's غير mu'arraf, or indefinite. Sijadati, my carpet, becomes mu'arraf, or definite, because by adding a possessive suffix on it, we have made it a particular specific example of its kind. Misr, or Egypt, mim, sald, ra, is mu'arraf because it's a proper noun. It doesn't need alif lam to make it a proper noun. Because it's the name of a country, it counts as mu'arraf. Tawila, or table, comes from the ta, waw, lam, to be tall or long root, and it's غير mu'arraf because it doesn't have alif lam, it's not owned by another noun, it doesn't have a possessive suffix, and it's not a proper noun. But Muhammad, a proper name, is mu'arraf because it's a proper name, and its root is ha, mim, dal, which means to praise something. Our next attribute that we're going to look at is al-aql. Al-aql means intellect, and Arabic treats nouns denoting beings that can reason or think differently from it does other nouns. This is endlessly problematic for first-year students. Pay attention, understand the rule, and you'll gradually get to deal with it, and it won't be a problem anymore. The word al-aql is a noun, and it means intellect. Aqil, from the fa'il, or doer, wazn, is an adjective, reasoning, someone who can think. Only nouns that are aqil can be truly plural. Nouns that are غير aqil, or not reasoning, become grammatically feminine singular when plural. This is the rule we're going to go over and over in the next few lessons until you fully understand it. In theory, aqil denotes angels and jinn and other superstitious orders of creatures, but for our purposes and for modern standard Arabic, aqil denotes human beings. So we can look between these words and see their jidr and indicate whether it's reasoning or not. So al-firash, a mattress, fa, ra, shin, is غير aqil. Mattresses don't think. Talib, ta, lam, ba, is aqil, because contrary to what professors often want to believe, students do think. But al-Kitaab, a book, kaf, ta, ba, it might make you think, but it doesn't think by itself. So it's غير aqil, non-reasoning. So when kitab, which is a masculine noun, becomes plural, it will turn into feminine singular, not masculine plural. Again, this will frustrate you for a while until you internalize it. Katib, which is not the book, but the person who writes the book. It's got the fa'il wasn't like talib does, so it's the doer of the writing. So katib is writer or author. Kaf ta ba, again, is its root, but this is a person, so it's aqil, thinking, so it can be truly plural, as we'll find out later. Al-hasub, the computer, most Arabs would just say computer, but this is the fancy word for it, is ha, sin, ba, which means to calculate something, and it's غير aqil. Banat, girls or daughters, has the ba, nun, ta root, and since they're human beings, they're aqil, or thinking. And this gets us to our rule. Non-human plural is feminine singular. Here it is in Arabic with all the fancy characters added. Al-jam' غير al-mu'arraf mufradun wa mu'annaf. Plural that is not definite is singular and feminine, is literally what this reads. Any noun that is غير aqil, that is non-thinking, will become grammatically feminine and singular when there are more than two of it. And this is true regardless of the noun's gender when singular. Masculine singular nouns that represent non-thinking things become feminine singular when they're plural. Feminine singular nouns that represent non-thinking things become feminine singular when plural. So for our purposes, only humans can be truly plural in Arabic. This is the most difficult rule of basic Arabic. If you can master this, you'll have relatively few other problems. In the next 2 videos that will be put up, we will explore this rule in much greater detail when we learn to count objects and when we learn to attach an adjective to an object to describe it. Let's take some examples. Al-Masjid. Al-Masjid is a mosque, one of the 2 words for mosque. We already know that the sin, jim, dal root means to kneel, so you can probably guess that a masjid, a mosque, is a place where you kneel. And it's mudhakkar, because it's a regular masculine singular noun that doesn't end in ta marbuta. But it's plural, masajid, here it's indefinite rather than definite. Again, it has the sin, jim, dal root, but here it's non-human plural. People who are in mosques are thinking, but the mosques themselves are not thinking. So we call it mu'annath. It's now become feminine because non-human plural is feminine singular. Kelb, dog, kaf, lam, ba is pretty obviously its root, and it's mudhakkar, it's masculine. If you want to make it a female dog, you can add ta marbuta and make it feminine. But just kelb by itself, or dog, is mudhakkar, or masculine. Al-Kitaab, however, the plural, has the same root, but it becomes mu'annath, because even if the dog really thinks it's a person, like some people's dogs do, it's still not a reasoning being, and therefore when we make it plural, we keep it singular, but turn it into feminine. Walad, or boy, has the waw lam dal, to be born root, and it's mudhakkar, because it represents a masculine person. But al-awlad, the plural, boys or children, while it has the same root, it stays mudhakkar, because boys, like all people, are reasoning creatures, and therefore they don't turn into feminine singular when they become plural. Again, we'll go over this more in the next 2 lessons and make sure that the examples given help you to understand how this particular rule works. The last attribute we're going to look at is case markings, and we call these harakat al-i'rab in Arabic. Case is a concept that barely applies in English, and what case means is marking words to indicate their grammatical function. If you have ever studied a language like German or Russian or Latin or several others that have case systems, this will be very familiar to you. But most English speakers don't really get it at first because we don't really use case in English. The only place we see case in English is with pronouns. We say, I kissed him, but he kissed me. In the first example, I kissed him. I am the subject, I'm the kisser. Him is the object, he's the kissee. In the second example, he kissed me. He has become the subject, the kisser, and me is the object, the kissee. So we change the form of the pronoun to indicate what its function is in the sentence. For right now, all we want to do is to understand that all nouns and adjectives in Arabic are marked for their case, and how to recognize which particular markings go with which particular case. Later on, in a later lesson, we will explain how to know what case a given noun or adjective is in. In modern standard Arabic, the case system is mostly redundant, so it's not the single most important thing for you to learn right away. We're going to kind of pick it up as we go along. A later video will explain the basics, which are really fairly simple, and then a lot of the details get kind of complicated, and we'll introduce those as we go along. There are 3 cases in Arabic: al-raf' or nominative, al-nasb or accusative, and al-jar or genitive. For those of you familiar with other European languages that use case, nominative, accusative, and genitive are actually kind of bad translations for these words, so don't go thinking about the nominative, accusative, or genitive cases in, say, German or Latin, and thinking they're going to apply in Arabic in the same way. It's probably best that you just learn the Arabic words for these particular cases instead. So the words al-raf', al-nasb, and al-jar are nouns, as you can tell from their alif lems at the beginning. The corresponding adjectives, which we use quite a bit more often, are marfu', mansub, and majroor. You can see that all 3 of those words have the same wazn, have the same pattern, the maf'ul pattern, which means something that has had the action of that root done to it. Usually, we use the adjective rather than the noun to describe the case of a given noun. This is just for tradition's sake. We'll take the first one, marfu', the nominative case. The root ra, fa, ayn means to raise or lift something. So the marfu' case translates as the lifted case. It's the default case is what it is. Definite nouns and adjectives that are marfu' are marked with a single dhamma, the sound at the end. al-Kitaab becomes al-Kitaabu. Indefinite nouns and adjectives that are marfu are marked with the character called tanween ad-dam, which means basically putting an N on the dhamma. And it looks like this. It's this strange looking little double dhamma character, but it's pronounced un. We don't see the N, but it's pronounced that way. We have the accusative or mansub case. The root nun sald ba means to delegate something or also to set it up. So the mansub case really means the delegated case. Definite nouns and adjectives that are mansub are marked with a single fatha at the end. So al-Kitaab becomes al-Kitaaba. Notice that the word itself doesn't change, just the ending we put on it. We're not changing the meaning of the word, we're indicating what it's doing in the sentence is the idea here. Indefinite nouns and adjectives that are mansub are marked with the character tanween al-fath, which means putting an N on the fatha, and it looks like this, a double fatha, and is pronounced N. We often add an extra alif to a word that is indefinite and in the mansub case for historical reasons. Basically, the Quran did it, so we do it in modern standard Arabic as well. The third case is the genitive case. We call it majroor in Arabic. The root jim ra ra, remember we can often have the second and third letters of the root be the same letter, means to pull something, or usually to pull it down. So the majroor case translates as the pulled down case. Definite nouns and adjectives that are majroor are marked with a single kasra at the end. So al-Kitaab becomes al-Kitaabi. Indefinite nouns and adjectives that are majroor are marked with the character tanween al-kasr, which means putting an N on the kasra, which looks like this, a little double kasra below the line, and is pronounced in. Again, we don't spell the noon out, but we hear it, in. So let's take a look at some case markings, identify their jither, and indicate its case. So al-masjida has the sin, jim, dal root, and because it has a single fatha at the end, that's the marker for it being definite, and it's definite because it has alif lam, and it's in the mansub case. But if we take the same word and we make it indefinite and we use double kasra, tanween al-kasr, instead of one fatha, then it becomes in the majroor case. So this means a mosque instead of the mosque, and it's doing a particular thing in its sentence, something that we'll explain later. Al-walidu, the father, again definite because of alif lam, its root is waw lam dal, and because it's marked with a single dhamma, we know it's in the marfu case. If we take off the alif lam, make it indefinite but keep it in the same case, the marfu case, then we use the tanween ad-dam character. So this is pronounced walidun. There's no N here. We just have to understand that that little character is pronounced un. Qalam is a word we know for pen. It really means read. Qaf, lam, mim. So because we see the tanween al-fath character here, the double fatha, we know that it's indefinite and in the mansub case. But words that are indefinite and in the mansub case often, in fact usually, have an extra alif added after them for historical reasons. So get used to seeing a word that you already know, like qalam, with a random alif put at the end. You'll find out that this is actually rather handy as you're learning basic written Arabic. For now, it's a little bit confusing. Later on, it will help you. Al-aqlam is the plural of qalam, pens here, so it has the same root, but because we see the kasra at the end, it's majroor case. Also, qalam by itself is a masculine noun, the pen, but al-aqlam, because pens are non-human plural, will become feminine singular. Again, this is something you're just going to have to get used to as you go through. Once you get used to it, it won't bother you anymore. This is a lot of information for one lesson, so you may wish to watch the video again and go to the website and download the worksheets and practice these. This is the sort of thing that you'll want to skip over because it's hideously boring, but it's actually very, very important to understand the basics of nouns and how to view them in terms of their attributes. If you take the time to learn this now, many things will be much easier for you and much less confusing later on.